Good afternoon. Welcome to the afternoon meeting of the BOCC. I don't know if Commissioner Weber will be here today or not. Oh, well, then the decisions will be easy today. There you are. Okay. We'll just start out.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mike Moss, Public Services Director. A little light agenda today, but we'll start off with purchasing. And Sean Rowe here is to discuss some changes that are coming out of Olympia on purchasing.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Rowe, Public Works Finance Manager. Today, we're just wanting to give you an update that there has been some significant changes to the state purchasing guidelines and the RCWs associated with that. They will be changing July 1st. Staff is working on a policy update for that. Ashley will be here next week to give a full presentation on that to the board and describe that in full details to you. But at this point in time, we just want to tell you we are working on that and we hope to have a full presentation to you next week.
Could you just maybe give them a 2 or 3 highlights of that so
Yeah.
they prepare themselves?
So currently, for public work bids, we have our levels where you can get 3 to 5 bids under certain values and pick the lowest one from there. That has changed. The 3 to 5 bids versus what moving forward, it would be a direct award qualification based on certain certifications of the vendors, being small businesses or minority owned or things of that nature. And we wouldn't have the option to pick between 3 to 5. If we are to use a small works roster, it would be all vendors on the roster we would have to send it to. So we have some options moving forward on that we'd want to present to you in more detail that give the county more flexibility still. And we'd like to present that. And I don't want to get too deep into the weeds right now without the full explanation in front of you.
So our hope is to give you a couple sheets before and after, some bullet points of where we're at and where we're going to have to be July 1. Unfortunately, certain projects may be not delayed, but it may be a lot more steps involved to get to the final contract part of it.
So do you envision this will improve the product from a taxpayer's viewpoint?
I envision that there'll be more legislation in the future to correct some of the issues.
So the taxpayer will not see an improvement, but they will see expenses.
I expect a lot more work. Yeah.
Yes.
It's always that way.
Yeah.
Sorry. We start off with great news. Maintenance. We're going to
Well,
start.
actually, just to comment on that,
Yeah.
that's because we need our chairman to be more influential on the LSC, on the Legislative Steering Council.
Yeah. I remember when this was working through the process last year. It didn't sound good.
Didn't make any sense to you then,
No.
and it still doesn't now?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our purchasing department was at a workshop was it a 2-day workshop, just learning the ins and outs of this new bill?
Yeah, the presentation was over, I think, 190 slides on the changes of it.
And they gave you such a lead time of 1 month before it gets put in place.
So just operationally, how do you handle that? Like anytime I ask any of you, you kind of already know it, but I'm afraid that you're spending half your time on that stuff.
Yeah, and so like I said, we're hopefully have some avenues that we can capitalize on that help move forward some of the smaller projects faster and other ways looking at ongoing as needed contracts that might alleviate other issues.
When was the last time a change in this occurred?
I believe 2019 was the last significant change to it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just one quick item on maintenance. We're going to start doing clean out of facilities. I think that this actually got started with some conversations with Kathy at OFM. We're going to start off, we haven't gave the exact date yet, but we're going to start off with the annex building. Our goal is to do like a spring cleaning of each of our structures around here. Including, we believe this building will be next and then move on to the Hall of Justice. We start off with the annex since it's a little bit smaller facility, get some waste control bins here, and then give people a week's notice of what can be thrown away and what cannot be thrown away and start doing some cleanup. Might help with some of our space needs down the road also. Annex is a little bit different animal because of the third floor over there and a lot of people's storage over there. So we're going to take a tour next week to see exactly what's on the third floor again. It's been probably 18 months since we've been up there to take a close look. I know there's a lot of storage. I believe elections or auditor's office has things up there. So we got to make sure we find right homes if we're going to actually move things out, or if it's just truly a spring cleaning, we're just taking extra debris out of areas. So hurdles we'll get to when we get to them along the way of figuring out exactly what facilities and what structures have extra space, because we've talked about the fourth floor or third floor at HOJ, the old jail, what's on this fourth floor at this location here. We might find some hidden gems, but also at the same point, find some space for departments that are like busting at the seams. So we'll get that word out next week of exactly the first date that we're going to do the annex building. Moving on to Public Works, we do have a request. Sean will get them a little bit more detail, but I did give you guys some pictures. These are actually true images, not one from Google. The front image is our current lawn mower for this is Longview shop.
Correct.
You can see there's no head on the boom there, so I've been taken by a different shop. Each location, our 4 locations, each have their own mower. This mower is 23 years old, has lots of hours, and has gone to a point where now it needs major work done to keep it going in the range of $35,000 to $50,000. This was on the books to get replaced in 2025. Instead of sticking money into it to get us through the season, we're asking to move the 2025 up to 2024. It's a $275,000 piece of equipment. The second page is an image of a mower that we're looking at purchasing instead of what you see on the first page. These are called Mower Maxes. They're more in line of exactly doing what we're doing, which is mowing on the sides of the road. Certain counties in Washington and Oregon have switched over to this model, a little more beefier and actually made for mowing. What we usually been doing is buying a John Deere tractor and converting it with a boom. And we have a lot of fatigue on that boom and a lot of repairs over its lifetime. So we're hoping that this would be a better choice for us, a little bit more stable unit. So we're hoping for the blessing for the board to move this to a 2024 item rather than a 2025 item. And then I think they're, what, 2 or 3 months out?
Yeah, 3 to 4.
3 to 4 months out.
Yeah.
Well, I think Mike covered that really well. Some of the other things I'd like to highlight on the second page one, the Mower Max, it also has gives us some more abilities to have attachments on the front of it. That little black section on the front takes all attachments that a normal skid steer would. So if we're grinding asphalt, running a broom, forks to unload anything, it gives the machine more options than just being a mower. It can be used in other times as well.
And we say mowing. Mowing to us is brushing also. So it's just not mowing grass. It's mainly mowing all the stuff above your ditch line.
Yeah.
So it eats a lot of branches along the way. So that it gets used pretty hard in its lifetime.
That's similar to what the state uses on the highways, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So you mentioned you were going to make a request, or are you making
That is our request
right?
today,
So
to
we
actually
need
move that forward if we could. Yeah, rather than waiting for the budget in the fall, it is asked to move it forward today.
Yeah, if you got an extended time ordering process, you might as well get it going.
Yep, I think I
Thank you.
support that.
Gladly pay you Tuesday for a mower today.
If you want to demo it, you can come up and down my road. I've been actually thinking about, because of my excavator, you can buy a mowing
The head,
attachment,
yes.
for running the sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to change, you need to change the head on the boom.
From a bucket, you can put this mowing attachment on it
Oh,
and
you
do
leave the bucket in place or you pull the bucket
you
out?
take the bucket off.
Got it. And so
Yeah.
it's up front.
Right.
You can use that for spraying also, can't you?
I probably could.
So good afternoon, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. So last week when we went through the ARPA projects, I had mentioned that we had 3 projects that had, I called them additional awards at that time. So 2 of these are congressionally directed spending and one is state directed spending. So I'm in the process of finalizing that paperwork, and a lot of them request the authorized signature. So I was wondering if you guys wanted me to run it through as Mike so we could keep them running quickly so we didn't have to wait for meetings to bring them forth for you, and then we'd run them through consent. So we have $1 million coming through the USDA. That was an earmark from Representative Glusenkamp Perez for the Riderwood Emergency Water System. We have $1.5 million coming through US EPA for the Shadow Mountain, which was a Senator Cantwell project. And then we have $2 million from the state coming through commerce, so from state commerce. So if you were okay with me having Mike as the authorized signature, if you wanted me to run it through Commissioner Dahl, Chairman Dahl.
I'm okay with it.
I'm okay.
Cool, go for it.
Okay, thank you.
So is Mike Moss involved in the decision-making at all then, if you sign off?
Of which part of the decision making? Of what color I'm painting some things?
I'm teasing.
I believe Savannah may have a couple miscellaneous items, updates for us.
All right, I don't think my items made the agenda in time. We just had a morning meeting with the USDA, and this is regarding potential funding for the Hall of Justice. Either
What did you just say? Sorry.
we met this morning with the USDA. Kathleen Walker is the program coordinator, and we are still working on potential funding mechanisms for repairs and or replacement of the Hall of Justice. So this was a debriefing from our multiple tours that we've had with the agency. And so at this point, we were trying to determine path forward for funding opportunities. What is it that we'll need to do next to move forward in the process? And so they've given us some direction. We've got some homework to do. And so we'll be continuing just to move down that path. She did state this morning that they will need a feasibility study done to determine whether we repair and stay or we build a new campus. She did state to myself and others on the meeting that their recommendation from the tours would be to replace the building, not do repairs.
The definition of repairs in that case means remodel.
Correct.
Also
Remodel, redesign space.
Bring up to standard.
Correct. They just, again, she did not give me their, official response to the tours yet. But she did state that due to the foundation, the structure of the walls being completely cement and rebar, that there were issues even in repairing and remodeling because of, safety with the air quality and it's built in the 70s. All the mechanical elements would need to be replaced moving forward. So there's a lot. So that was where their recommendation came from. But of course, she mentioned we would need an actual feasibility study to move forward. So we have asked for a scope of work just to get pricing on that from Etta, AKA Collins, our architect on call. So hopefully we'll have some additional information on that soon.
How are you going about this?
In requesting a feasibility study,
Yeah.
we're just right now in the beginning stages, just trying to get pricing on how much will be charged to even develop a feasibility study.
Okay, because inclusive in there is something that, I mean, that's going to be driven by Superior Court primarily, I think, because everything else is office space that can be understood, but the courtroom isn't as well understood. I've had no luck at all to get the courts to specify what they would like. They always wanted to contract out and have somebody tell them what the courtroom should be, and I would recommend you stay away from that and you make them tell you what the specs of the courtroom are. It's the only way to, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a hard job.
Adam may have a little bit of insight in that because when we were talking with them on the juvenile hall, they were aware of state specs and stuff for that. So I don't know if they have some, I'm just guessing, I don't know if they have some information on what courts look like or what they need to have.
There are courtrooms around the country,
Yeah,
and they surely can pick one out and say, this is kind of what we want.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Population, potential growth. I think all the, all of that will factor in.
Well, what I would suggest is they take a modular approach and they tell you what a courtroom is, along with the jury room and all that. And then they tell you how many of those they need. Then your architect can arrange them. And that allows them to think if the building will ever need to be expanded, how would you add another fourth, fifth, sixth courtroom?
So I imagine the facility or the feasibility study would be three-pronged. That is the remodel option, remodel and addition in place, totally new structure somewhere in Kelso. And then the third one is leasing from an existing facility with remodel. I think that was one that you've been trying to look at as well.
Yeah.
They should look at all those different options.
Yeah, and if that's the board's direction, we'll go ahead and make sure that when we're finding scope pricing on this, we will request that. Other counties have done that. I think it actually was Thurston County. We're looking to do a huge remodel. Is it Thurston? Yeah. Pre-COVID, and it got so expensive, COVID probably factoring in, that they just ended up leasing out buildings. And so they have a campus that's it's not ideal, but that they did have to do something similar to that to make it work. So, and it could be more cost
We kind of
effective.
know Snohomish County's was pretty close to 200 million for their new courthouse.
I think Thurston County was quoted in the 250 range,
Yeah.
So we're going to be in that range too for new.
250?
250 million.
Yeah, so it's expensive.
Yeah, remember we talked about the leasing approach and how that might stretch your dollars. So it is two issues. They're almost separate. What do we want for the building, and then how do we go about getting the building?
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It'll get, yes. We'll be back in front of the board for sure.
But if the state office of the courts, what AOC, I hate
Yeah.
using that acronym because it
AOC.
has a double meaning, but administrative office of the courts, I think. If they may have standards already, and rather than rely on folks who have a self-interest in preserving what they have or, their own perks, find out maybe what the state recommends.
Great idea.
We're in charge of providing the space. So, and if we follow state guidelines, then that should be satisfactory to them. Since And I say that only because they've not been very forthcoming,
Right.
right? So.
Yeah, exactly. At some point, you just say, well, this is what we got for you.
Yeah.
So is
It's
that
a
okay with-
process.
So is that okay with you?
Yeah. You short timers are killing me here.
We don't want to put him on the spot, right?
Ooh, couldn't we? Yeah, we could have fun here, couldn't we?
Good.
There are 2 votes here. And he has to live with it.
He has to live with it, yeah.
It's not going to be an easy process. It's a long process, but we can't kick it down the road any further. We need to start moving. Correct. And
When-
hopefully find an end date at some point in time.
But
when
did you
are-
ever have a conversation with Craig about how much work he had done on it originally, or had he done anything on it?
On the Hall of Justice, I
Yeah.
haven't had any conversations with
Oh,
Craig.
okay.
It was
So
just the
Craig-
previous
Craig was the
architect.
junior architect, I
Yeah.
think, in
Oh,
the
Guy?
company with John Crook.
And when he was with Collins, Craig, yeah, and so he's sold, and I don't know if he's retired or still on.
Oh,
But I have to try to get a
Mhm.
response from them, and then yeah, he might have some additional information.
although information from somebody who said, yeah, that didn't work. We shouldn't do that again.
Yeah, maybe.
Or being very defensive that, well, it was
Yeah.
never maintained the way we
Yeah, correct.
recommended. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
it'd
still be
I think we're
interesting.
vulnerable to that as
Oh, yeah.
well.
I agree. We are.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like this outlook, I'm going to say, but we will have the landfill bonds paid off in
34?
2030s? Is that
I
a,
thought it was like,
They were,
I had
they were
34, I had
30, they were
2034 in my
30-year,
head.
30-year bonds, right? So 34. Weren't they 30
did we
yeah,
refinance?
financed.
or 20 years?
So 20, I thought it was 2034 in my head, 20-year bond.
34, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
20-year bonds, I
yeah.
think, yeah.
34, so we still have 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, by the time we get this building there, maybe.
The
Should be
timing will
well
be
left.
perfect.
No,
huh?
I mean, the point is that we got 2.5 million to play with.
Yeah, at that
Yeah.
point, correct.
Rick will be retiring by that time.
He thinks he's going to be here until his 100th birthday.
Oh, well,
That's news to him.
either that or he'll be old enough to run for president, right?
Yeah. What?
He had to fall down a few times first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thought I'd say that.
I had my fall down story over the weekend.
All right, just the last item is a board request for the building off of 7th Avenue that is currently not for sale, but could potentially be for sale to use for storage and a chaplaincy. So we did do a walkthrough last Wednesday with our on-call realtor. So we'll be going probably in the near future, if not early next week or late this week, to revisit the site and go through some of the outbuildings.
Which building is this?
This is the request from
Oh,
the
got it.
chaplaincy.
Yeah.
So just an update that we have gone on site, visited, and we're working with a realtor. We'll probably be back on site again.
Did anybody from the sheriff's office join you?
No,
No.
Might want to have them walk so they know what it's. The storage, I mean,
Yeah.
we're doing it for the storage for the
It-
sheriff.
It sounds like the storage is just the shell. It's been pretty well electrical and everything pulled out and,
Mhm.
and the roof needs replaced.
Mhm,
It sounds like there's a few more issues over there than,
Mm,
mhm.
you would first encounter. So I think we had a brief conversation earlier and I think it's prudent. We just look at it like you would normally look at buying something. We don't, and I think we all want to help the chaplaincy, but it's not at any cost.
Right, right.
It has to be prudent and reasonable and,
Correct.
and fair to the taxpayers.
Yeah, we thought about the sheriff's office, but we just, our team only to start with to see what it was like. And after we could invite Sheriff Thurman
Yeah.
over, but he might be disappointed in the storage aspect of it.
So we'll probably have more updates to come.
Yeah. Because it's the storage aspect is the rationale to buy it legally.
Yeah, unfortunately, the biggest
The
shed.
leftover stuff we can rent out. right?
Yeah, correct. The biggest building there, the biggest shop needs to come down.
Mhm.
Actually, the owners mentioned that also, so. It needs new roof, new siding and new doors and all electrical has been pulled out of that structure. So,
Ideal new construction then.
gotta be new construction. But we'll go back to their realtor and get some inspections ordered and see what the value of that is and come back to you guys as a group and have some discussions.
You know, it's adjacent to other property owned, so obviously it has some value to us, but it's not unlimited value.
And that's all I had.
Unless you guys have any miscellaneous items. I know you have Department of Ecology at 2:30.
2:30. I have some, but I don't think they involve building and planning. Miscellaneous items. I don't think I have anything for you.
We'll be in the crowd.
Who wants? Gina wants to bring something for him? Okay, Gina, go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you. I had just a quick miscellaneous item, bringing back an item from last week that Commissioner Weber was not part of one of the meetings, so the board suggested I bring it back when the full board was present. So this is in relation to our CDBG grant for public services. This is the grant that is passed through to Lower Columbia CAP for Meals on Wheels. So this year, the state is looking at doing an amendment instead of a brand new grant cycle. So what they're asking is that we submit a document saying, yes, we're interested in an amendment. It would have to be signed by the chairman. They would then we would submit that form back to the state. Then they would issue the formal contract amendment. The contract amendment would extend the end date of the current contract through June of 25, and it would add the public services grant allocation for the next fiscal year as well. So instead of doing a brand new contract like they've done in the past, they're offering an amendment. It's just a little bit easier of a process to add next year's allocation for funding. Once we would receive the official amendment from the state, that would be scheduled for a Tuesday regular public meeting with the commissioners. So I just wanted to see if that's something that we would be able to move forward with. Like I mentioned, the form requires a signature from the chairman to submit, and then they would issue the formal amendment after that.
How much are we talking about? I think there's additional few dollars, right?
So they're just adding next year's allocation. So the current contract is a total of 67,000. Next year's allocation is actually 1,000 less, so it's 66,000. So they'd be adding $66,000 and extending the end date through June of 25.
See, they could have done it with fewer dollars.
So refresh me on some of these, and I'm not sure this one. We always have the option of not doing it, but on some, then the state just goes direct. Is that one of these?
I assume so. I know with this one, we have to pass it down to Lower Columbia CAP. So I imagine they would look to do that if we chose not to engage and just do a direct contract, but I'd have to double check. I know everybody does it a little bit differently.
Yeah, that to me is not an answer. It's either a yes, they would pass it through and bypass us, or they would not.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I would have to ask on this particular one. Yeah.
Maybe it was
So
the big
CDBG
contract I was
yes,
thinking about.
CDBG is a federal grant that the state gets.
Mhm.
And it's competitive. And then they have the rules that apply to that federal grant. I'm thinking though that because it's a federal grant to the states, it may have to go to local governments to be distributed. But they want it distributed their way, you know, if I remember correctly. Because, and the reason I say that is because the city of Longview apparently has a large enough population that they get CDBG grants directly. So, but it's a local government, it still goes to the cap.
Is there any chance we can make this competitive? I'd feel a lot happier if it weren't just always going to cap. If it,
This particular funding is designated, I believe, at the federal level for community action programs. So there's other CDBG grants that don't have that requirement, but this particular public services grant is designated for community action programs. So it has to be passed through to a community action program.
so if I were to take the time, you could point to me to the federal regulations that defines a cap?
Oh, yeah, you could.
Yeah, I've looked into it before and gotten some information about it, and I could try to dig that up again. Yeah, it has something to do with the funding that's designated at the federal level, and it's specific to community action programs.
Is there a definition that says there's only a single community action program in a community?
There is a limited amount of approved community action programs in areas, and I can't remember if it's the state or the feds that limit it so that they don't want any areas overlapping. So there can only be one in a certain area.
So the Lower Columbia Community Action Council is designated for Wahkiakum and Cowlitz County.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a board of directors. A third of the board has to be elected officials. So for example, right now we have 5 elected officials. Commissioner from this county, commissioner from Wahkiakum County, city of Cathlamet and Longview. Has had a member in the past. Kalama's mayor is on the board, and I can't remember the fourth one. And then so that's 1/3. 1/3 is from the private sector, so not connected with government, theoretically. Although interestingly, the PUD counted as private sector because they're in the electricity business. So oftentimes we'll have retired contractors, you know, from the private industry.
Yeah.
And then 1/3 have to be chosen from what they call the target population. So you remember Shannon, what's her name from Highlands? What's her last name?
Eckerd.
Gilman.
Gilman.
Yeah. So she was elected by the Highlands Area Community Council to represent them. There's somebody from South Kelso, 5 target populations. And that's all specified by federal law, 1/3. And they get allocations from the federal government called Community Service Block Grant Funds. CSBG, yeah. CDBG means development, so that's infrastructure.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is because our successors will have to live with that. And I know it's a weak point because I've never been able to get a reasonable straight answer out of CAP, and the only way to ferret that out is with competition. So if there's something we can do that starts a process that 3 years from now, you've got,
introduce some competition. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I have no issues with competition.
yeah.
But what you're asking here is they want to know if they can just do an amendment instead of sending us a whole new contract. But if I sign this amendment, it's also saying, it pretty much says we're going to fund that particular program, right?
Yeah,
Even though it has
Lower
to come
Columbia.
back, even though it has to come back through us, it pretty much says we're gonna fund that program.
We're still, yeah, it's sort of saying we're interested in doing this again, in passing the funds to CAP for Meals on Wheels. And then there would be a final decision with the actual contract amendment.
So CAP couldn't use it for some other worthwhile program. Must be for Meals on Wheels.
Right. For this, yeah. We have talked about other options in the past.
Right, but that's not what's on the table now, right?
Right.
I feel strongly about this, so I'll support the chairman and however he wants to handle it.
Well, I'd like to have more options, but I'm not. I'm okay if they want to do an amendment. I think that stuff should still come before the public so they have a chance to look at it. I'm pretty well sure if we decide not to do anything, they'll find a way to move it to them anyway, and I'd rather the public have a chance to look at it. So I would be okay with the amendment.
Okay, I would support it too. Mayor Hellenberg is the other public member. So.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll get that form. I'll work with Kelly and get that form to you.
And that's not necessarily a final decision, right? It's just bringing
Right.
it forward the next step.
No, yeah,
But we understand the rules, so.
yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see the full amendment at a Tuesday public meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That was all I had. I appreciate it.
Okay. Other miscellaneous I had written down, we talked a little bit about the new opioid settlement, and Kathy can go in electronically and put us in on that, and it signs my name electronically, but she needs to know that we're all okay with that before she does it.
Oh, that's just to bring it into the county.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's that, I think I said 47.5 million payable over 11 years.
That was the latest one, the Kroger one?
Right.
Now
Right.
that's over the entire state, that number that you gave.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we get to like 2.4% or whatever our
Yeah.
meager share is.
Yeah, whatever our share is.
And in that, I think Jana might still be listening. Have we haven't officially stated how we're spending any of that award money?
I don't think we have.
I don't believe we've officially come up with ways to do it, have we, Gina?
No, we haven't. There's been kind of some preliminary discussion about some of the work going on with the juvenile center and looking at that for some increased treatment. And there's a potential there for the opioid funds, but beyond that, we've not had any fleshed out discussion about how to use those funds.
So, gentlemen, I apologize for being a little bit late. As you know, on Wednesdays, I attend the Longview Rotary Club meeting, and as sometimes happens, I get asked questions and about things once the formal meeting is over with. And an issue came up about this very topic, about what is the county planning with those opioid dollars? And the reason for the question was interest in whether or not we would be interested in developing a program to make Narcan more available to people in the community. People can buy it, but it's $70 a dose or whatever, fairly expensive unless you're the one whose life is saved. And that money, I mean, it sounds like it might be a possibility. I know we make it available for the sheriff's office. And I'm assuming all the police officers have access. At least that's my understanding, but other members of the community that might want to have it available, might be an idea that could be relatively easy to put together. So I don't know, Gina, I know you mentioned something about 7 pages of possibilities.
Mhm.
Can you look at that and see if that's might be a possibility for at least some of the money?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is an allowable use to do something like purchase Narcan or naloxone. We are looking at incorporating some ideas around that into our Board of Health priorities that we're working on. One of the items we identified was substance use. So we are kind of exploring some of that, and the opioid money could be a way to fund some of those activities if we wanted to go down that road.
I think the more difficult challenge is how we actually address that, the highest risk population, that is those young white men who get hooked. And because the youth programs apparently seem to, the numbers are so low, but it's that, what was it, 24 to 44 age group, that's in the worst case for opioid deaths. And
Yeah,
and then the even older folks that are second.
except we don't have enough data there to think that that's not just transient. And I'll say this too strongly. I like the idea of the Narcan because I think I would feel obligated. I think the lawsuit was in large part improper, but so now we have the money and we ought to use it in a way that actually mitigates the damage that they've been accused
Right.
of doing and so forth. And
Right.
the Narcan is one possibility.
Yeah.
I still like doing something with that underutilized youth center if we can get it transitioned to
The
more of a
youth
treatment center.
is defined as,
juvie,
The thing
the
we're
juvenile
looking at
detention
with
center.
juvenile,
Yeah.
I have a meeting the week when I'm back, and I'll probably have some updates and be able to show you guys a little bit more of what we're seeing over there.
yeah, so prevention, this is prevention after the fact, and you're looking prevention before the fact or
Yeah.
at the fact?
Yeah.
Well, the sad reality is some of the more well-known programs that have not proven to be very effective, Just Say No in the DARE program. Actually, we're very effective for those who don't have an intention of ever taking drugs. They're very strongly in support of these programs. It's that we have some people that have addictive personalities where they're more susceptible, and any kind of stress in family just makes it that much more likely that they're going to turn to some kind of pain relief of one kind or another. And
Don't touch that stove, it's hot.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Oops. You're right.
But
unfortunately, a burn will dissuade you from doing it again. Drugs make you want it even more.
Exactly my
So
point,
that's,
yeah.
yeah. So it's a pretty difficult nut to crack. So
yeah.
especially if it's already adults and if you have family structures that are imploding, we know all about that. It just is, it just compounds the likelihood that people will turn to those other substances. I think the statistics suggest that the legalization of marijuana has not been as much of a gateway drug as we were all told growing up. Smoking pot will lead you to heroin. I mean, that was a pretty strong message when I was growing up. I was like, oh, stay away from that.
I
But
think
so many people have used it without necessarily going on to harder drugs. That
I
yeah,
think what you're saying is we do not have the trust of the people, at least the war on drugs did not gain trust from the people because there were all kinds of misinformation, exaggerations, and that's what we're paying the price for here.
and yet
Yeah.
it spills over into other kinds of crimes. I mean, that's the real social cost.
Jana, do we fund the family health center at all?
We have one contract with Family Health Center for the Phoenix House.
That's right.
So that's that transitional housing for
Yeah.
individuals who are coming out of inpatient treatment.
And didn't that just change to complete housing authority? Didn't we just
Oh,
Is that
approve?
the
that's
one that
right.
went to
Yeah. No,
Oshawa?
thank you. Yeah,
Oshawa,
it's with
So-
Hoswa now.
Yeah.
My apologies. That did transition this year over to Hoswa. So the only contract we have with Family Health Center is for coordinated entry.
Family Health Center is the folks who got the money for the needle exchange
Or
program
the syringe exchange program,
when,
yeah.
when we
and
turned
then-
it down. So
Well, it's a challenge, but I agree with my colleagues. We're starting to see some money come in. It's going to get to the point where you're going to get some pressures to do something with it. The issue is just not to spend it foolishly, right? To spend it on something that you can say down the line, we made a difference, and that's always the tough call.
Narcan is not treatment though.
No, it's not treatment.
Saves lives,
but
but
it does
yeah.
save some lives and maybe it gives somebody a wake-up call. They won't do it. I don't
as
know,
long as we
you
understand
know.
that is one strategy, but it's
Yeah.
not the answer.
It's not the,
There's going to
the
be
answer.
multiple options to try to get a handle of this.
The thing I'm thinking about Family Health Center, it's not a well thought out on my part, but I don't think the syringe exchange is a proper thing for any organization to do. I think it is proper for the syringes to be available as they are now completely. You don't need a prescription, you just order them, you buy, and they're cheap. But the fact that we have a Family Health Center that gets involved with doling them out and exchanging, I think causes the problem of the dead needles out on the street and all kinds of stuff. But maybe we can substitute income for Family Health Center in some way that they will agree not to do the syringe exchange. We got people with diabetes that don't get free syringes, right?
I think it can be looked at. In fact, yeah, I've been studying a little bit the exchange program Lewis County just put on the books and looking at that a little bit to see comes with, I don't, because I agree with you. I don't know, just giving them out. There needs to be some intervention or some way to try and move them to help instead of just helping them stay high.
Yeah, and giving them something for free that we don't give somebody
Right.
that needs it for,
Yeah.
it seems awkward.
Well, I remember one report back from the health center after they got it. They've only come back to us once. And they talked about the process, the innovation, the change from the way the county used to just dole them out.
Yeah,
That they set up an accounting system, a bank, so that if you brought back more than what you signed up for,
you could
you
bank
got
it.
credit.
Yeah,
And they said that at the time, they said that they were gaining back more syringes than they were handing out. It was pretty satisfactory. I have no idea if that's still working because people change and,
Yeah.
I have no idea.
and then going back to a comment you made many years ago now, I looked at the data for cocaine users versus the number of cocaine addicts, and it was this number of users, this number of addicts.
People were multiple users.
Well, they would play with it a little bit and then they go off and do something else. So it's not like it was intrinsic in the cocaine, but yet you're told if you touch cocaine, you're going to go nuts, and next thing you know, you're hooked.
Well, I will have to admit, with all the information about fentanyl, it was scary at first, but then you realize, people aren't dying left and right from fentanyl because the producers understand if you give lethal doses, your customer base is going to go away. So it's cut into everything.
Yeah,
And, but it's still
That tells you
addictive
that
and it
there are-
still can be dangerous. So
that tells you there are enough clients out there that they don't pay too much attention. I think I heard some dealer get interviewed and they said they don't worry about that. They lose one here or there, it doesn't bother them.
Well, that's a
I-
couple other
I did
miscellaneous
have a
before
question that I wanted to ask that a decision may have already been made at a time when I was out of town. Because I've gotten emails from Doug, copies of emails about the IT position.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the job offer had been made or whether we need to talk about that in executive session, but I see there's a letter I'm supposed to sign about something and I missed a step. Other than the note from Doug was cautionary.
My thinking executive session, but Rick knows about it and so does Kelly, and there's some things that I don't want people to assume other things. Your thoughts?
I think it'd probably be an executive session
Yeah.
thing, and it doesn't have to be right now.
It can or cannot, you said?
I don't know that it has to be right now.
Well, except I have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow.
Do you?
Yeah, and it'd be nice to have Dennis's signature on that.
Okay. Let me get through two other quick
Of course,
things and then then we can do that.
That's
'Cause
why
I know
you're the
we have the
chairman.
Department of Ecology. Bailey was doing a couple travel voucher things for us, but it needs to have everybody's approval. And one was mine just for mileage going up to the LSC. They provided the room and meals. And one was for Dennis's travel for the shorelines thing. And I
You
think
mean we're paying Dennis to go to the beach?
Well, I think he went to Stevenson. I think it was
Stevenson,
Stevenson. So it's just a rental car expense for Dennis and it's just mileage for me up to basically
I'm good
Shelton
with
and
that.
back. Okay. So Bailey just needed that head nod, so we were good. The last little miscellaneous I had was we had talked about the Museum, Children's Discovery Museum, and helping them out with the move. And the deal was, if I was to get with Kathy and see if there was funds available to help, if you remember, it was like 50,000 to get them moved and cover expenses. And she felt that there was no problem. We'd be able to do that if we so choose to do it. So if we're
Like
still okay with it, then I'll tell them, give her the okay.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. With that, before the other gentleman comes in, we can do an executive session and talk over IT.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it'd be, what would you call that? Personnel?
Yeah.
And-
Qualifications.
Yeah. Probably about 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, back from executive session, no decisions were made. We will see our guest is here. Or did you want? Right over there. Okay. Boy, I got that one, got that one, got that one.
You move over.
Yeah.
Apparently I'm chairman. I got promoted.
There you go.
That came from engineering.
I don't know.
Yeah. They screw it up all the time. I get it.
I get my name misspelled. I've seen your name occasionally misspelled.
It's only public works that the other departments have to figure it out.
I think this might have been more helpful, huh?
Were you expecting another person?
Yeah.
I'm, okay. I might let you introduce yourself because I'll butcher this, I'm sure. Yeah.
Turn my mic on. There we go.
Little
How's
green
that?
light.
Green light on?
And go ahead and feel comfortable pulling it closer to your,
Okay, perfect.
there
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've had the pleasure to meet, but I don't think you've met Commissioner Weber or Commissioner
No, I don't.
Woodson.
Not yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us here today, commissioners. It's important for me to come meet and say hi and introduce myself. And I think these workshops are a great idea. So thanks for having us. So I'm Babak Talibi. I'm with the Washington State Department of Ecology, and I took over as the Southwest Region Director April 1st for Rich Dunges, who had a long career with us and a successful one. And so, yeah, I am jumping into this head first and got to be out on the Toutle River for my first site visit here in Cowlitz County. And so that was a good opportunity to take a look at the river there and discuss some issues, and got to meet Commissioner Dahl out on site as well. So yeah, thank you for the invitation.
So when I first joined the commission in 2013, we had quarterly meetings with Ms. Todoff.
Yeah, Sally. Mhm.
Yes, and but that continued on up until then she retired, I think,
Mhm.
and then it got stopped. But COVID happened somewhere on the way in that time as well. So I always felt it was very helpful to know about all the different projects that ecology had an interest in Cowlitz County.
Yeah.
Because we don't always know, because it doesn't always deal with, county government, but mostly it does.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got to work with Sally.
Here she is. Here she is.
Oh, there we
Here's
go.
Shauna.
I got to work with Sally in my previous role, or one of my previous roles at Ecology as a coastal planner, and really enjoyed that and got to know more about her job in this role. And it sparked my interest originally. And at that point, there was no way I was ready for a job like that when she retired, but got to work with Rich too, and continued to build my interest. And I've worked for Ecology for 13 years. I started my career as a planner in Island County in 2007, 2008, out of undergrad. And it was an eye-opening experience for me, having to do all the things at the county level.
land use planning, shoreline planning, compliance. I mean, you name it. And so that was, I think gave me a really good foundation into understanding the implementation side. And then from there went to California and worked for a couple agencies doing sea level rise planning, climate adaptation planning, and training programs for coastal planners and resource managers. And then came back up north here to do my graduate work at the School of Marine Environmental Affairs. And a year into that, got called by Ecology. I did a project position in the Northwest office doing shoreline master programs. And then from there went on to be a coastal planner. And then more recently before this, I was managing our coast floodplains and shoreline management portfolio. And so it was nice. I've been at headquarters now for over a decade, and it's nice to get back into the region and work on implementation issues and be a little more connected to communities and helping all of you at the local level get the resources you need. So cool. Yeah.
I'll tease you a little bit. You know how hard it is for us to keep up with all your rules.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard for me to keep up with our rules. So I feel you there. Yeah. Shauna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, how are you?
I'm Shauna Hanisch-Kirkbride. I'm the Vancouver Field Office Manager for Department of Ecology. So our office is a satellite office based in Vancouver. And we focus on Clark, Cowlitz, and Skamania counties. So I work for BOBAC. We're just a subset of the region to focus on issues down in those areas.
And Shauna was also out at the Toutle River site visit.
Yeah.
What do you think of all that? When I think about, I described that, and not just what we refer to as LT1, not just that site you saw there, but the whole part of the Cowlitz till it gets out in the channel. The way I described it, I said it's a bigger deal than I think people understand because they don't deal with it all the time. I mean, if you're going down the road and I got people driving over potholes, Public Works, or I get a call, we get calls and say, you need to fix this, right? Well, you don't get that so much on the river, but I think it's starting to see, well, you saw the erosion there, but that's just not the only place, and how we deal with all that, it's starting to be a big issue. And I don't know, you guys are trying to figure out how ecology can help us work with that. And we're working with Army Corps on a federal level. I don't know how we mesh all those together to make something happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can start, and Sean has got a little more familiarity with the river systems than I do to this point. But I would say that one of my first experiences with Mount St. Helens was as a kid. My dad took me up and really young, and we went and visited, and I was just blown away by the environment there. I mean, seeing the trees down, and it's recovered since then. I mean, I'm turning 40 now, and that was probably when I was 8 or 9. And so, being out on site with Jim and the rest of the folks, I was just shocked by the magnitude of just looking at that one cell and the magnitude of ash, and hearing about the acute problems. And Shauna and I followed up afterwards, and we were having some conversations back and forth about just how to characterize what we had seen on site. And the first thing that comes to mind to me was the more immediate problems, and I'd say more acute areas of erosion that are, at risk of the infrastructure that's there. So the road that we took a look at specifically, and then hearing more about from what Jim was describing, the landfill site of where the confluence is, and just thinking about different ways that you can influence a system like that in a natural way, but then also the more immediate needs to protect those areas and what we would do in those different circumstances. And so I've seen other issues kind of like that, or problems like that. There's a need for immediate solutions while also working at that kind of system scale but to me, I was just blown away by the magnitude of ash, honestly, and how you would even influence a system like that to that extent. And the first thing that we were talking about is, man, this seems like a problem for the Corps. So, you know.
I know it. It's hard to, I don't, you know, when I was back and had a chance to talk with, I think his name is Steve Kopecki or where it was back there, one of the top in the Corps, and you can show them the pictures. I actually, Mike Moss, our public works, gave me some aerial photos starting from the 80s and stuff. And you can see how that river is migrated over but to go through, you know, to go through the process and actually start doing something to mitigate that, we're already planning a different route into there because the road will be gone by the time we ever get done. And I don't, I always struggle is how does the state, how do we work with the state and then the feds and coordinate all that to make sure it gets to move it off the needle. I mean, when we look at it, of course, I'm pretty simple. I'm going, okay, we own that property over there. The river used to run there, some dynamite and a well-placed button, and we got it running over there again, right? But it doesn't happen that way. Not without somebody going to jail, and I can't talk to any one of these retiring guys into pushing the button.
Well, in the collaborative, the Spirit Lake Toutle Cowlitz Rivers Collaborative, I think Dennis has been the most involved with on the commission, exists to deal with those, you know, those interagency, you know, trans boundary issues. I mean, it's really complicated because you have all the upstream, you know, sediment that's still coming off the river. You have the stuff behind the Corps' sediment retention structure, which is just building up as its ability to stop the sediment, you know, it's been reduced over the years. And then you have the dredge placement sites, right? And so there's all these different levels, and we've talked about the short-term urgency of places like in the county there. Mostly it's, you know, it's those dredge spoils where there wasn't a lot of forethought put into that because they were just in emergency mode, right? They just needed to put it somewhere.
Absolutely.
And here we are 40 some years later trying to figure out, realizing what a problem this still is.
And it's proven to not be a good base, right? Because we saw Rock Creek after 44 or 40 whatever years being plugged up, one event and it's all gone. And the road's gone with it.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. I
And then the
that.
state highway gets
Yeah.
twice now, the same location got wiped out. Rain events, but it was all that very loose sediment. So
Now, if we can get
it's frustrating a little bit for me, having worked through the collaborative and hearing the intransigence of the Corps, the lack of their flexibility to look beyond the lower Cowlitz as their bailiwick, when it sure seems like common sense. If you can keep that sediment from eroding off of the bank, it's not going to end up in the river. And they just don't want to get involved in dredging again. So that is frustrating. Yeah,
Unless we can
because
get it into the Columbia, then they'll dredge that.
then they'll dredge that, and they're equipped to do that. And
We are trying to set up a meeting with folks from the Corps' Portland district to maybe initiate some conversations. There's other issues, Vancouver Lake, that the Corps is really would be a good partner on, but you do kind of have to nudge them to get them thinking beyond just the, you know, what they really have to do. And it's funding. I understand that. They don't just have money to do anything, but they really focus on flood risk.
yeah,
So a question about that. Does the Corps really care where the money comes from? Because I'm thinking this is a Washington state problem, basically. And the state has maybe can spring the amount of $100 million or 200 million to do the dredging, say. Would the Corps, from your perspective, be interested in saying, we'll pay for it if you'll do it, or we'll allow it to be done?
So in my experience, working with the Corps, I think there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. So the first thing is their authority and which section it falls under for the kind of work that we want to do. And I think understanding that as a system of what the intended outcome is would give us a good understanding, but you need the Corps to participate at the very early stages because they have a lot of the resources and the amazing expertise to understand how to even evaluate the problem and understand what the long-term and short-term fixes are that are going to work as well. So,
So wait, you're saying that they may have a technical argument?
yeah, I think they have a technical piece here too to help evaluate. And that where I've seen the most success of helping engaging the Corps is from the very early stages. If you can find a way to partner with them to do a study, the study tends to be in line with the follow-up action. So I think that's where we might find success. But I would say that, any way that you can, the federal government's always looking for a way to leverage funds. So I would say that if we're looking at a partnership opportunity where there's local or state investment, there's more likely going to be interest from the federal level to partner on a project like that. So a lot of the sections have matching rules that they have to participate on. There's cost benefit analysis, there's all those different technical items. But I think if we can get the Corps to, it sounds like there's already been some first steps, but what we heard on site is that there might be a little extra opportunities here that we could potentially play as a state to meet with the Portland district to follow up on that and help encourage that. And that's what we're trying to get scheduled for June 6th with them, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. That date works for them. But that was one of the more immediate things that we took away from that site visit is can we play that role to help elevate your voice and connect with the Portland district to get them more engaged in this problem? So, so that's what we were trying to follow up on. But
and then on our part, we had a meeting with our federal lobbyists to start talking about because of amending their authority from Congress a little bit to expand it to that. Because right now it's pretty narrow. It was basically flood control is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I think you're right. I think you have to work on both ends and try to work through that. But at some point in time, we get an endpoint.
It is another federal law that says, gosh, we have to save salmon, restore salmon funds. As Shauna knows, she was you were executive director of Lower Columbia Fish Enhancement Group for a while. And I couldn't quite understand why the Corps dismissed this Endangered Species Act as being irrelevant to their authority. We do not do volitional fish passage. We're not allowed to. That's what they said, that we're not allowed to by law. We have not been authorized to do volitional fish passage. And okay, well, let's fix that. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't. It's, but
I don't understand that either.
Yeah.
Is that from Carl specifically?
Yeah.
The Army Corps?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think having broader representation from maybe more ecologically minded folks at the Corps might be, or who have more experience in that area might be helpful. But I do know, I mean, fish recovery is important. It has to be because they're, ESA protected.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not clear on that either. They work with WDFW to get fish around the sediment structure, and
you can't adequately, but my thinking is you can't adequately manage the sediment if you don't include the fish and strategies for the fish. I mean, it's all part of it.
Yeah.
But
sediment is not a friend to
but
salmon.
not to them.
Right?
Right.
The North Fork is weird. It's gaining traction in the salmon recovery community because there's some kind of natural recovery happening, but it's always going to be limited, right, by the sediment plane and all that. So it's just a conversation. I mean, we're going to keep, I guess, pestering them and the Corps and try and open some conversations. They do have special programs. There's one, I think it's section 1135, which is specifically geared towards ecological restoration. And they just haven't used it because of funding. But the Corps does have several programs that they can use, but somebody has to ask for it. And I think either state or local can do that. But it's been used out on the Yakima River to do some work out there.
You called that section 1135?
I think it's 1135. Are you familiar with that, Bob?
I'm not,
It-
no.
It's ecological restoration. I can double check, and I actually probably have it in my notes here somewhere, but
And
But-
is that, which particular law does that come out of?
I don't know that all of their authorizing legislation that well, but I think.
Is that
they
a
only have
WORDA? Would that be a
couple-
WORDA language?
I'm
Oh, well,
not
that-
sure. I'll look into it and I can send you a
1135?
link to some info on it.
That's,
Um,
I think one of the benefits of meeting or our intent to meet with the Corps is to learn about all the different programs because there's so many different authorities that they can activate. And I'm still learning about the river system Corps. I've been more focused on marine shorelines and I've got a lot of experience working with the Corps in that space, but developing those relationships with the Portland district is something that I'm going to be working on here. But I think there's not only the authorities, but there's also the way that they navigate and the district's interest in navigating those authorities that align with the district's interest. And so it helps to have a champion within the district who really wants to see something happen. And that's where starting with those, trying to build that partnership, trying to build those relationships to start and then understand exactly which ones might be used in which ways. And 10 years working with the Corps, there's still sections that I thought I understood and they get interpretive in different ways now. And I think there's ways to get to yes, as long as you have people working who are interested in doing that at the district. So we'll see what we can investigate there and see if there's any other authorities that we can identify in addition to the ecosystem restoration one. And then if needed, I think we can elevate and see if there's opportunities to work directly with the Colonel to see where we can find other opportunities too, if those aren't identified with those levels. So, yeah. Mhm.
And I would suggest to you anything you think we can help you with on that. I know I personally would be more than willing to help. Because I just see it as a big problem that's not well known.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would very much welcome that. I think there even might be opportunities here for you to join those conversations. And I think local leadership is always going to be the most powerful with any state agency or federal agency. I think if there's a need and there's opportunities to partner, I think that's what really activates our service to local government. So I would say that's hugely important, Commissioner Dahl, and we'd be happy to help support and find those doorways for you and see what we can do on our end.
Over the years, we have worked pretty well with our federal delegation on Mount St. Helens related issues in particular. So I know they're very open when we remind them about the challenges that we have, and so they too can be a help. We got some extra time to study those beaver colonies with a little involvement on her part. And
Yeah, it's quite a phenomenon. You talked about your father taking him to visit. Well, I'm a little older than you, so I can remember watching. I was out in Vancouver watching it go, and to think 44 years later, I'm dealing with some of the stuff with it. Just, I would have never guessed at the time, would have never guessed.
well, my geology professor at the U talked about geologic time being something humans can't really fathom and understand it. This is certainly,
Yeah.
certainly is living out that reality. Definitely.
I will just add, as we all know, the 50th anniversary is coming. It's not too far away. And that seems like a good opportunity to get more attention from whether it's the Corps or the federal legislators, whoever that is, over the next few years, to invest in this area. It seems like great
That's a good
timing.
point.
So.
And I don't know if they've been out on site, but I tell you, it's pretty impactful to be there on foot and look at, just the banks look at the size of the river, you see where it's eroding, it's not a small scale thing. It's pretty impressive to be out there on site, impressive in many different ways.
They're pointing out the place we were looking at is the rock shale down below and all the dredge spoils above it. It kind of gives you I wasn't at that spot pre-1980, but I would guess that was probably where the river, the shoreline was that rock. And now you have this humongous amount of spoil sitting on top of that stuff.
It was also well illustrated with the Tower Road washout at a little creek we call Rock Creek, because it got pushed, all the sediment got pushed out back to the original culverts, which were still there, and it's 25 feet down, which means the Tootle has eroded that far down, not just that little creek, but the Tootle didn't support the flow under the road. But those we just continue to work with. And so the thing we always struggle with the collaborative is getting to the point of making the recommendations that we're supposed to. The federal agencies are very quick to point out, but we can't do any lobbying. So it's like any kind of decision we make is that lobbying or what? And we have to continue to muddle through. At the same time, the research is happening. I mean, they've studied the core blocking Spirit Lake, and they're saying we're not anywhere as close to being able to do an overland route. Although I don't think they've made that official report yet, but that's the preliminary information we're getting. And we did the research on the beaver colonies, which holds great promise once we can stabilize that little side channels. I think we're a long ways from stabilizing the main channel yet, but Dr. Thorne certainly has some good ideas about slowing down the flow up above and holding it back that way. And then, of course, we've got great promise with the rehab going on the South Fork, which doesn't have that kind of problem, but it's just as dynamic. So progress is being made, but not down in the lower stretches. And that's ironically, that's the part that's closest to where people live.
Yeah. It's good to start somewhere, and that work in the South Fork and the North Fork, it's retaining some sediment, so that helps, but it's not dealing with what's down there now, which is still a threat. They essentially buried the floodplain when they put all of that stuff, when they placed those dredge spoils, and it messes up the hydrology of the area, right? You don't give the river anywhere to go. If waters are higher than, if they're in flood stage or anywhere near that, right, they're just going to blast through that sediment, push it into the river. That's the big concern, right? It's going to take out roads and the gun range and whatever. And again, it's just dealing with decisions that were made years ago, right? That have become more and more urgent. That's really the challenge.
Well, I hope the Corps doesn't feel like they're being attacked for making wrong decisions, because we all understood, we've never done it before. To give it your best shot and then make the adjustments as need to be made.
That was the mindset then. I mean, they had to do something for sure.
And what they came up with is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It just, things have happened a lot quicker and longer than we expected.
Yeah, I think that's where, they just have so many technical experts that it's so helpful when they engage and can help. And so we've seen huge success with that when we can get the ear and get them participating as partners. And there's just the wealth of experts that they have is just pretty incredible to essentially to this big system kind of process that we need to figure out.
So what kind of a role do you envision for Cowlitz County playing? What would be the most helpful, most productive?
In the sediment issue?
Well, the sediment, the lower Cowlitz.
Well, our experience with some of the shoreline management, some floodplain management work. Oftentimes counties do take quite a lead role. If you look at, say, Pierce County, but they're much bigger programs, right? With a lot more financial resources. Some of those counties have literally, they have staff members who deal just with salmon recovery, right? And so, a leadership role in working with ecology, in floodplain management, coming to meetings that we might be able to set up, have that conversation, sharing what's important to all of you. I think that just participating and supporting what we're trying to do as well. That's, I think those are things that would be helpful. That's kind of soft skill stuff. It's not very meaty, but we're still trying to figure out what, setting up, meeting with all of you, meeting with the Army Corps and seeing what expectations are. And then we can, talk about partnerships and things like that.
Yeah. And, I've got experience with working with jurisdictions that don't have any resources and have seen the most inspiring projects in my career. One of which is in North Cove in Washington, on the coast of Washington. And, I remember we had done a technical study to update the erosion projections out there. And if you're not familiar, this is one of the areas with the highest erosion rates on the entire West Coast of the United States. Not well known, small community, has lost over decades, just continually experiencing loss. A lot of multi-generational families out there, cranberry growers, cranberry bogs at risk of saltwater intrusion, and not a lot of resources. But I remember we did a technical study to update the erosion projections for this particular area, and presented it to the community and met with some level of pushback. That's a nice way of saying not well received. And I remember that was 2015. And I remember during that meeting, the drainage district, chair and the Shoalwater Bay Tribe Chairwoman Nelson standing up and saying, they're not going to do anything for us. We got to do it ourselves. And that's not the first effort that they had done, tried to do something. And so the resilience there to me was just inspiring that they would stand up and say that. So David Cottrell recently passed, and watching his, so no resources, drainage district, cranberry grower, watching him, essentially, he is the expert. And I would say that's the same for you. He knows the landscape. He lives there every day. We don't do that. That's not us. And I think we are going to wait and we want the communities to be the leads because they're the experts. You have more knowledge of the river system than we might. And that leadership is really important. We can be there to support, provide assistance, find money, and play that role. But I think I've seen the greatest success when it comes from the local leadership level. And that can be a local government, that can just be a community member. And so I don't think it's our role to lead an initiative for you. I think it's not going to be successful if we do that either way. But I do think that we can play a huge supporting role and we're willing to do that. That's why we're here. That's why we've committed to quarterly meetings, and getting back to that because we want to be here to support, and provide, step in and play a role that we can, but we're going to rely on you to define what that role is for you, in large part too. So that's what I would say. I think it does come down to leadership, and leadership can mean a lot of different things. It can just be willingness. It can be sometimes being the voice, and then we can be there to help support. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the most powerful thing because we want to find a solution that works for you. I don't know if that's helpful or not. But.
Yeah, no, makes sense. I actually think locally we need to drive it. Yeah.
Can you, just changing topics, tell us how the Reynolds cleanup is going along?
That one I have not been briefed on.
Hmm.
So,
I'm not familiar with it either.
Yeah. It looks pretty bare. We just drove out there yesterday or Monday on the way to the cemetery. And I go by there every once in a while just to monitor, and it's, it's stripped down. There aren't any buildings left except for right at the dock for loading and unloading commodities. But I didn't know if if they were on schedule to get it done according to whatever the agreement was they had with ecology. But it looks impressive because it's so stark. It's just bare land and ideal for development, actually, I think, but who knows?
You said Reynolds?
The old Reynolds aluminum plant.
Okay.
So the Alcoa Northwest, whatever they call it. It's where the coal terminal was proposed, the coal export facility. Chinook Ventures had been out there.
What, they dismantling that place?
Well, all the old aluminum buildings
Are gone, huh?
down.
Huh?
Well, maybe not the office buildings. I think they're still there, but all of the reduction mills are gone, and the cable plant is gone.
Wow, I haven't been out that way
It's
in a while.
bare, which is good. Make it easier for the next facility that goes out there. Another ongoing ecological problem was on the old International Paper site, now owned by the Port of Longview, the asphalt, where they used to asphalt the logs. And I know there had been a hearing, oh gosh, it's been about 6 years ago or 7 years ago, outlining a plan to get that all taken care of. And I haven't heard any kind of an update. I haven't heard anything about that.
So I've learned a little bit about that. And to the previous one, I can certainly follow up. International Paper, I believe, are still in conversations with the port to come to an agreement on, and I might get the wording wrong here, but come to an agreement on the cleanup method, because there was contamination found. I think if you're talking about the mechanic site, is that the building you're talking about?
Probably.
Yeah. So what was previously identified, they thought that they could clean up without vacating the facility itself. And as they did further investigation, I think there was more understanding that maybe the building could not be used while the cleanup was happening. And so right now they're working through to try and figure out what the outcome of that might look like. So I know that
And the they is International Paper, not the port. The
With
port
the
wants it
port.
done, I suppose.
correct. Yeah, correct. And I had a conversation with Michelle, I think 3 weeks ago. And I can follow up and get an updated status
And
on that.
Michelle is the port's environmental.
She's our
officer.
lead on
Your
that.
lead,
Yeah.
okay.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And that's a negotiation between the port and International Paper at this point. But we're trying to figure out if we can play a role in helping get to that outcome. We have talked about potential opportunities for bringing in a third-party facilitator to see if we can help with that, but I'm not sure.
The port closed it down, not the port. International Paper closed the mill operations in, I'm thinking, the 70s. The port bought the property in the late 90s, and it still hasn't been resolved. And that's not very high on people's priority list, I guess. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I can follow up with Michelle and get an updated status for you.
We also have a large shallow lake, Silver Lake, that is the favorite of those residents who live around there. And used to be a championship bass fishing location.
Yeah.
And of course, over the years, it has gradually filled in and turns warm and gets blue algae, whatever it is, the alerts where you can't get in the water.
Green algae, cyanobacteria.
And we've had a committee out there studying, and they do have the grass eating carp to try to short circuit the eutrophication. I think that's the fancy word for the lake dying. The thing that keeps being mentioned is whether or not there's any possibility of getting approval for some kind of channel widening or dredging to scoop some of the goop out of the way and retain the recreation boating, the good parts of having a lake like that. And people almost to a person will say, ecology will never be on board with it. It's like, so does ecology want the lake to die? That seems a little contradictory for the recreation aspect of the mission of conservation.
Sounds very similar to Vancouver Lake.
Mhm, mhm.
Have you followed that?
And I think Lake Taps up in, is Lake Taps another big lake that's
Okay.
got a problem up in Tacoma, the Tacoma area.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I say, well, I grew up in Longview. We dredge our lake every 50 years or so, but we dredge it. But it's a long, but it's Lake Sacagawea. It's a long, narrow lake. And I wouldn't expect the entire Silver Lake to be dredged out. I mean, that's a mammoth body of water, but re-engineering the lake, I don't know what's involved, whether that's just a non-starter to begin with. But
I wouldn't say that's accurate, that ecology. I mean, it would be a discussion to have and find
Okay.
out more about. Do you know with the hydrology of that lake, is it connected to anything, or is it just?
so there are two
Related.
major creeks that empty into it from the south. So they're north flowing creeks. One of them is Hemlock Creek, which is at the east end.
Mhm.
And the other one is called Sucker Creek, which comes in at the west end. And the deltas of both those creeks are enormous and thickly vegetated.
Hmm.
And there is an outlet creek that is controlled by a dam, so they control the height of the lake. They try to control the height of the lake. And Outlet Creek goes out to the Toutle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
Is that
very
right?
familiar.
Is that right?
with it.
There's another, Susan's our county engineer. Did I describe it wrong? I think I'm missing something.
You described it right. The big thing to know about the dam, it's an NRSC dam, so it's just an earthen dam. It has no active controls. It's just a weir and then a small gate that's not much bigger than this table that you can open and close. So they don't actually have any physical control over raising and lowering that. It's just they added the earthen dam in to keep the lake levels consistent in the summer and purchase some extra during the flood season. So that it's not an active dam of what most people think of as a dam. And there are salmon all the way up to the dam, and there is a fish ladder, and they do have some that get out, and there's a fish containment structure to keep the grass eating carp in.
Usually with things like that, there's some kind of hydrologic alteration from historic levels. So I'd be interested. I'm not very familiar with it.
Yes, I think it was created by eruption from Mount St. Helens.
Okay.
So it was
Okay. Yeah.
kind of what happened with Spirit Lake, only much lower in elevation.
Yeah.
So that whole east side, I think, is the Lahara that the Outlet Creek goes through.
So mainly recreation concerns
Mhm.
are the county's focus.
Well, I think,
there.
yeah, I think so.
Mhm.
I mean, water quality is
Yeah.
important too. And that's the first time I've heard that salmon they don't get into the lake. The dam stops the lake, right? Susan? Okay.
If it's that warm, I'm sure they don't thrive there.
Yeah, they don't, yeah.
It's fish ladder. They don't thrive. They test. I think it has a temperature and standard. And then they are testing, what are they testing for? Phosphorus and
All the chemicals.
all kinds of things. Silwac is running that. So,
I think there's an island that's still on septic tanks. That's
yes,
problematic.
I believe it's Goat Island, isn't that what it's called?
Walden.
Walden?
Walden Island.
And they're all on septic tanks, and the tests show that they have higher fecal levels right next to that island. And then it's mainly, a lot of it's, one side's mainly Warehouser land, and we've got the wild horses up there that you see in the lake. So it's a interesting area.
Is it 303D listed? Do you know? For water quality?
I can't remember if it's 303 for temperature,
Okay.
but for the rest of it, no, I think it's just temperature that it's, if it is listed, it would be temperature.
So we actually have a Citizens Water Quality Committee that meets regularly to
Mhm.
monitor it. SLOAC, we call it,
SLOAC.
Silver Lake Water
Advisory.
Advisory Committee. And then there is also a flood control district that I think is responsible for the dam. And they contract with the county to maintain or to monitor the dam, the gears and stuff. Unfortunately, the flood control district does not include the watershed. It's just the people who live along the lake. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Is there a campground along Silver Lake? Like a
On the
big
North Shore
RV?
off of,
RV
off
park?
of, yes,
Yeah.
there are.
I think we stayed there
There's
once.
about 2 or 3
Yeah.
cabins and right off of Spirit Lake Highway.
Yeah.
In fact, Spirit Lake Highway goes over portions of the lake.
Yeah.
It's
The
all
frogs are
causeway.
great in the spring, the frog chorus.
Oh, I'll
Yeah,
bet, I'll bet
off
they
of-
We
are.
don't get that. in the
Hall Road,
city.
I think is where the,
You do get it in the city if your neighbors have ponds. Guess
Oh,
whose
yeah,
neighbor
yeah.
has ponds?
Not where I am in Vancouver, anyway.
then you find them in all that noise and they're little tiny
Yeah,
guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. So it's a great resource and we want to do something that, I mean, to protect it, you know, economically, a lot of jobs based on this tourism that comes in and, you know, our most important neighbor there is Weyerhaeuser. So there is that concern. I think the other interesting wildlife phenomenon is the hoof rot for the elk that are in that area. That they're in the midst of a big study to try to figure out what to do.
Oh,
It's
the hoof disease?
hoof disease, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The fungus. It was, I remember being up on a field trip for the collaborative and we saw a herd of 30 elk, 29 elk and 1 hobbler. And it was magnificent to see the herd. And then it was like, oh, the one at the tail end, because you know, it's not going to last the winter because it's going to be caught. I don't know any other ecological issues down your way. We have an interesting partnership with the city of Woodland, which is in need of upgrading sewer and water facilities. They are planning under the Growth Management Act because a tiny section is in Clark County. But the tools they get because of GMA planning is not available to them because Cowlitz County is not. And we don't have impact fees and we can't do the pre-annexation agreements. So we're having to work around as they look for opportunities to gain residential additional customers for their utilities because they've got to expand it, but they need customers to pay for it. And that's a real huge dilemma. So we're in the consequence is the residential development is on 2-acre lots in Woodland Bottoms, which is not the most efficient way to address urban housing needs. So
2-acre lots?
that's the minimum size for rural areas. So you're converting, farmland into 2-acre lots. So
Yeah, Woodland's growing. We were just headed up to Merrill Lake over the weekend and went through there and I saw new housing developments just since I was there last year. So
Oh, yeah.
growing
The-
pains.
The 2020 census showed that Woodland, the city, grew at the same rate as the rest of the state.
Wow.
Cowlitz County grew at only 7% over the decade.
Mhm.
And Woodland was at 14%, which is what the state was. So people say, well, why aren't you doing GMA planning? And I said, well, that's supposed to manage the growth you have. You need to have growth first. And with the mills shutting down and us not being able to replace those mills, the growth is barely happening.
I think Cowlitz County's turn is coming.
Well, we've been hearing that since the mountain blew.
Yeah. It just seems like all of Western Washington is such an attractive place for
Yeah.
people all over the country.
Mhm.
Eventually but
Yeah, I just went to the city of Ridgefield last week, 2 weeks ago,
mhm.
and it just blew me away how much development's happening there too.
Well, they're getting a Costco. That's the measure of growth, right?
Yeah, I've been down through there a couple times watching some of the high school baseball games, and I remember Ridgefield, probably the old timers down there are probably just having a fit. All this is coming in.
Yes.
You can imagine they had their little place down by the river and they were all good, and now all this stuff. But yeah, it's growing like
Well,
crazy.
and they've had their share of the same kind of the difficulties in development, because the big houses you see next to the freeway are on 2-acre lots because they didn't have sewer lines. But I'm trying to think. What else do we have? Susan? Ecological problems, environmental problems that we have any say over?
We're giving them a whole list to solve here, so they're.
My notes are extensive. If I can read it afterwards, I forgot how to write too, with all the technology. Yeah.
Well, probably closing in on an hour, but I found this very helpful. It was nice to have this going again. Sounds like you used to do it quite a bit, and it took a hiatus. So we have the Forest Service comes in every so often, and
Starting that back up
yeah,
again.
and it's always very helpful. It's helpful to me anyways. I'm sure it is to my colleagues too, just to understand everything you're working with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having us and for the invitation to meet quarterly. I think in the future, if there's specific topics that we can come prepared for, I mean, obviously today I'm still jumping into this new role and there's a lot to learn. But if there's anything specific that you want me to prepare for as I come into these, just let me know and I'm happy to do that, or Shauna. And we both committed to attending these and in the future. So yeah. And Commissioner Dahl, I heard you sign up for Toutle River follow-ups. So
I did, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Perfect. Thank you again for your time.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
For
thank
coming
you.
up.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you.
Can I tackle one more miscellaneous before we get out of here? We have, since I'll be gone next week and it's coming up pretty quick, we have Board of Health expiration terms and appointments. The last time I wasn't sitting here, I think, I'm curious how you want to do it this time around. Do you want to go through the process, or last time you had an interview process, or you just want to look at the applications and do it like we appoint other?
I don't know that I can defend it, but my preference would be to treat them like we treat any of the other
Like we treat the others?
boards. Although this is not exactly like every other board.
It's different, all right. Well, and we do have the categories that we have to fill.
Right,
So
right.
we have to keep that in mind. And the applications don't mention that. We've had a couple of applications come in and I noticed that. they don't
Yeah.
Make reference to which category they feel they fit.
Yeah, I talked to one of them and they told me the category and they said the other one was in the other category. I don't remember.
I think there's 3 we do, right?
Who are the, I think Mary Jane, Lindy, and
Kelly,
Kelly.
the tribe appoints,
They're on their own schedule. I think,
right,
yeah.
they're on their own schedule.
And Mary Jane, I think, represents the community stakeholders because of her work with the Healthcare Foundation.
That sounds right.
And Lindy represents lived experience because of her work as a school nurse. And Kelly, I remember mentioned that he'd worked with veterans. And so although
Right.
veterans aren't a requirement, it's strongly encouraged to consider veterans' choice. But he didn't really have any other particular qualifications.
I think he did, but I don't, was it as simple as he was a veteran that used veterans services? So he was a consumer rather than an
Yeah.
official
Yeah.
provider?
Yes, I think that was the connection.
I'm really open to however I don't mind doing it the way we do others. I don't mind other suggestions too. I just think it's coming up. We probably better have some kind of plan in order.
Is that at the end of July?
I
Or
think
the end of June?
End of June. I
End of
think.
June, okay, so.
so.
we have
So the
to-
next meeting would be the last one with the current board.
Right.
Yeah,
Want to give it some thought and tackle it again when I'm,
Their expiration dates are June 21st.
their expiration dates are June 21st. So
So
they won't be available, they will be gone. We just had the last meeting with them then.
Mhm.
Oh,
Don't we have a meeting in June?
yes, it's the last Tuesday in June,
Oh, it's the day after they leave or something like that.
the 25th.
So if we're going to do reappointments, going to have to get on it fairly quick.
We've got 3 applications. You said
That's because
I've
the
just seen
Indian-
2
the-
applications.
the Indian representative is on their
Right.
own schedule.
Oh, so you
So
said.
that's the 7th
So
person,
you're
so it's
saying
the
we
3 of
have 3
us.
seats that we have to fill.
Three
Right.
seats that we have
3
to
seats
fill,
we
yeah.
have to fill.
Okay.
Well, 5 that will have to be filled.
Well,
Arne and I are taking.
a little
care
later.
of that. Has anybody talked with any of them as to whether the incumbents are planning to return or going to apply to return?
If I would typically look for, if there's enough demand, trying to circle and get more people in. I know Lorna and Bill have applied.
Those are the 2 I've seen.
Yeah. Kelly, I think, wants to reapply, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't either. And I'm unsure on Lindy because I know.
Lindy, I'm told, doesn't want to apply.
Yeah.
I heard that too. And I can't remember who told me, but
So maybe over the next week, some other applications will come in and I think we need to talk about it or
So
review them
we're-
and give suggestions or however you want to do it.
Yeah. I think we do it like we do the other boards. We'll get the applications in and we should select them a week before the other board meeting. That gives us enough time. And that, yeah.
You got 4 of them now? Okay. Okay. So what I'm hearing is we'll plan to have our selections done by the week after next or something
as
like
soon as
that?
you get back.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, after you get back.
Okay. All right.
How long are you gonna be gone?
Just a week.
So you'll be gone Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Right.
And are you leaving too? Do you still have another eye thing?
No, I think I'm gonna be here.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought you had another eye surgery scheduled, or you have already had to, or?
I'm going to be here, am I not? Yeah.
Okay, that was my last miscellaneous. Okay. Nothing else. We will adjourn. Thank you.